All right, fantastic. Well, Bonita, you just finished introducing yourself, but I would like to reflect what you just said. Yes, we met about a year ago in San Miguel. And from what I have had the honor of learning about you is that you've had these magnificent opportunities to learn and to work with different divine masters, divine healers. And teaching is something that's very just very, very important to you, something that you do and you live and you walk that path every day. I would like to ask you a question. When did you know teaching was something that you wanted to do?
Oh, that is so silly. Well, I've always been a natural teacher. I used to, I was a scientist, so I taught science. And I always mentored my staff. I'm very proud of the number of people who promoted under my guidance. The first time I taught a spiritual class was when several non-physical guides basically harassed me until I promised to lead a guided meditation. And I was terrified. I'm like, I'm not even that good at meditation. I'm like the poster child for ADHD. My idea of meditation is running through the woods for an hour. That's it. And you want me to lead people in public with words coming out of my mouth. I was terrified. They said, don't worry, all you have to do is empty yourself. We'll come in and we'll do it for you. And I was like, oh, thank you, thank you. That would be so good. So the first metaphysical classes I taught, I didn't teach them. I just left my body and let non-physical guides come in and teach. And they were brilliant, of course. So I got a reputation of being a brilliant teacher. And I was learning along with everyone else. When I channel, and at that point I didn't think of it as channeling, I thought it was my friends helping me out of a tough spot so I could honor their request. When I channel, I stay lucid and awake. I just sort of hang out nearby. And so I became a teacher, and I learned while I was teaching. And after several years of teaching as a channel, um, and taking courses on my own, I finally got the courage to teach while I was in my body.
Wow, what a process. Yeah, thank you for
Mhm.
sharing that. And I think for those watching or listening, whether they're here at the live or watching the recording or listening to the podcast, I think there's a few things I heard in there that we may be able to relate to. That sort of calling or push to channel or to connect is something that I hear echoed by many of the students here. It sounds like that was something that maybe you felt being guided or being called to channel from your guides. Would that be accurate?
Well, it I didn't think of it as anything other than I was in a panic and they offered me a solution to not be in a panic.
Mm.
And I knew that it was important to them that they share certain lessons and frequencies. And they wanted to create certain portals. And those could only be done by bringing people together. And I didn't know what they were doing. I did not understand it. So I didn't want to be the one in charge. I was just very grateful that they offered to take over my body and do it. And really, I was doing it for years before I ever heard the word channeling. I'm like, channeling, what's that? I'd like to learn how to do that. How do you do that?
And then come to find out you'd been doing it, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, and I think several of our students can relate to that because when we did Eden, so many of us were saying that the things we were teaching are the things that they came to learn. Because one of the first things I say in Eden, which is our extracurricular psychic development class cohort, and the first thing I say on the first day is, I'm not going to teach you anything you don't already know.
Mhm.
So because there were so many students saying that they would get, halfway through the program, and it was like I was helping them remember things that they already knew how to do. And so tying this back into leadership, I think the word leadership can be charged with so many different feelings and emotions and maybe even negative connotations for some of us. But what we're wanting to talk about today, or what I'm wanting to talk about today, and I think we both are, is where that intersection is of leadership and spirituality, and what that looks like for us as individuals and collectively. And I'm really excited to dive into this presentation. Bonita, is there anything else you feel like we should talk about before we get started?
No, I think you and I really planned out an excellent and articulate program. So I think anything we need to share will come up in the organic process of sticking to our PowerPoint.
Okay, yes, I'm very excited.
Yeah,
A couple people may have filtered in. Yes, two more people are joining, so thank you anyone who's showing
lovely.
up. Please, let's stay muted until the end, and then we'll have some time to ask questions if you guys want to do that. But anytime throughout the presentation, if you want to drop a question in the chat, we'd be happy to take a peek at it while we're presenting and see if it's something that we can cover. All right, well, let's go ahead and go to the next slide then, Bonita, if you're ready.
Okay.
All right. What is spiritual leadership? So I typed out my definition, and Bonita, you typed out yours separately. So we didn't peek at each other's, which kind of made this fun for me anyway. So what I came up with, which for me felt very heart-centered, just kind of wanting to talk about what the process felt like for me, because even this, this part of the presentation where I was defining what leadership looked like, or what the definition would be in human words, as we all know here as intuitives and channelers, can be very limiting. Human words, human language, especially English, it's definitely not one of the most descriptive or romantic languages. To come up with a definition that feels like it captivated the magnitude and the weight, the magic and the beauty of something so profound, it felt like it had to come from my heart. And so when I was writing this, I had my hand on my heart, and I was just feeling what my heart wanted to say. And so that was to pursue or accept a position of visibility in the discipline of spirituality, which places the practitioner in a position of teaching or healing. And so for me, those words, pursue or accept, those could be interchangeable. Maybe we're pursuing it, or maybe it's kind of being laid upon us, right? So that might look different. And then the discipline of spirituality can look different for different people. I know, Bonita, you're going to talk a little bit about that in a bit. And then I felt like teaching or healing could be interchangeable here, because spiritual leadership could fall probably under both of those terms, and there's a lot of overlap. So that's my definition. I'm excited to hear yours.
I love your definition, and I agree with everything you said. Mine, I consider it more of a personal thing, because as I say there, you do not need to lead people to be a spiritual leader. I have met spiritual leaders when I am projecting my consciousness to repair global mandalas that are crumbling or in disarray due to human interrupting all the frequencies on our planet. And I run into, like the Tibetan Buddhist monks. They're doing this work all the time. And of course, they are global leaders, but they're not just out there leading people in the 3D. They're like, and now we are going to enter a meditative state and go up to certain global. So mandala is like an energy grid. It's like a network of energy. And so imagine like the roadmap of frequencies as they're traveling around the planet, connecting whoever is supposed to be naturally connected, be it lions around the world or the trees of the world or love. There is a mandala of love. And if you go there and work on global love, you will find Tibetan Buddhist monks working. I consider it to be a state of personal evolution where you've learned enough of your life lessons, your karmic lessons, that you're not still lost in the drama of your life, where you have gone through stuff, you've learned stuff, you've moved on, and you've released the self-doubt, self-recrimination, the negative emotions, and the drama that was present during the time of the lesson. And we all have these experiences. To go through life without karmic lessons means to go through life without growth or experience. So you have gone through enough of your lessons that your path of desire to be there for the planet or for others is as powerful and potent as your desire to be here for your personal growth and the well-being of those you love. So I've met spiritual leaders who live in caves in the middle of nowhere. They're not leading people, but they're still doing very powerful. I've met spiritual leaders who only heal the ocean. They don't work with people at all, but they're very important for the sea animals and the coral reefs and the seawater. So
Yeah, and if I may just interject there for those of us who may not be familiar with this idea or the concept of the consciousness of things like the sea or whales, right, or elephants, because some of us are just now opening up our minds to this idea that there is even consciousness outside of us that we can even connect with. And this idea of there being a collective conscious with, for example, the elephants or the dolphins, those are the two I hear about the most. And the mandalas, there's a close connection there. And the elements as well have a consciousness to them. And so any of these collectives that have a conscious, which can be, if I'm not mistaken, just about anything in existence, they can also receive healing. So this idea of healing being transactional from person to person is actually a very human earth thing, a very 3D thing. But I think what you're saying, Bonita, is that spiritual leadership can extend beyond healing and leading people so far beyond that. That's actually just a very small part of spiritual leadership.
yes. Yeah. And I think that's also important for people who don't have any interest in standing on a stage in front of 1,000 people or don't want to do a podcast. Like, how can I be a spiritual leader if I have no desire to be on a big platform? There is so many ways to be a spiritual leader, and they don't all include working with people or teaching people. And this is also a way for someone to be a spiritual leader while maybe they're growing their sense of what sort of leadership. There's a safety in being a spiritual leader of nature beings or energy grids, and you can grow and learn about yourself before you ever have to be vulnerable enough to be loud and proud in public to other people.
Wow, that's beautiful. The piece that stood out to me in your definition, Bonita, is your path of service is as potent as your path of self. That really spoke to me. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. And so before we come to life, this is the Akashic perspective. And understand whenever I speak, it's generally from the Akashic perspective, which your soul plans your life before you come to life. If you are a brand new life, if it's your first 50 or 100 times incarnating, you're pretty much all about yourself, or maybe yourself and a few people that you care about, or maybe yourself and your very small town community. Because it's sort of like your first day on your first job. You need to like learn stuff before you can take responsibilities. Mm. I know for a fact that everyone here is an older life. You all have incarnated many times because you wouldn't be here in this program if you were a young life. Young lives have no interest in this. So older lives, you get to the point where you don't want to just be there for yourself all the time. You want to help out others. And the more experienced and incarnated life you are, the bigger your desire to help. There is some who, before they become ascended masters, they want to have the big life, like Mother Teresa, Buddha, Jesus, etc. The big life, because it's all about service, although their lives were also about self. They were a balance of self and service. for each of us, wherever we are in our incarnation process. If you are looking at how can I be of service and in what way, that's already a sophisticated question. You may honor yourself as an older life who has lived a lot of lives and has a lot of past life experience under your belt, and think about how is it for you to be of service at this time in this life. And that will be a unique question and a unique answer for each person at whatever stage of life you're in.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. All right. So ready to move on from this slide? I think so. I feel ready to move on.
Yes.
Okay. Different types
Okay.
of leadership. I think this is you, Bonita.
Yes, this is for me, different types of leadership. Because you can be a spiritual leader and also be a political leader, or a family, a leader within your family, or you do not have to just be one type of leader. You can be but I think if you're a religious leader, generally you are sharing information. Thank you. Sharing information that has been taught to you. Usually there's a level of doctrine and a process, a protocol that you exist within. There's a structure that you probably find comfort within that you wish to share with others. If you're a political leader, hopefully you're one that actually wants to represent and support the well-being of your constituents, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're any of those without spiritual leadership, I think that you will only be a 3D human leader, and it would be very easy to become corrupt or arrogant or egotistical and feel like you're the one making it all happen, and therefore you get to do whatever you want. We're seeing a lot of this happen right now in the US with political leaders. We're seeing it happen around the world with every one of these lifestyle leaders. We have, Gwyneth Paltrow and Kim Kardashian telling everyone how to live their lives, and hundreds of thousands of people follow them gladly and just love them so much. And that's fine. I assume that most of them are very young lives, and this is where they're at in their incarnation cycle. Those are not the same people who would generally want to follow what I have to share. So I make sure there's spiritual elements in any level of leadership that I have. And I consider, and Dante, I'd love to have your thought. I consider spiritual leadership really to come from what I call divine to myself and share that with others through the frequency of love.
Yes,
Always. Sorry, go on.
yeah, that resonates with me a lot. And I think the way that I connect with that is working with this idea of divine love and the self-love work that I was doing, and we were also doing in ARCADIA on our month of self-love, was asking ourselves, what would somebody who loves themselves do? Like as a decision-making device in every decision-making process we may need to make. And I think extending that into leadership is definitely possible. Because when we are true to ourselves, aligned with ourselves, when we're not compromising ourselves, that's truly coming from a loving place. And I think when we can learn to do that adequately and with humility and with compassion, it becomes second nature to then be able to do that with others. And I think that's such a great preventative for things like corruption and going off the path, as well is always remembering to lead with what you're calling like the divine. I guess for me, I'm using the word love, but I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah. Like if you live only in 3D without spiritual practice, it is very easy to think that your life experience is all there is. And everything good you make of your life, you get all the credit for it, and you get to be whatever you want. I mean, I think this is true, but it's a very it's only part of the truth. When you start bringing in the spiritual connection, connecting with your soul, connecting with the universe, what I consider divine may not be what anyone else considers divine. But there's a thought that there's more. I am not the ultimate of greatness. There is more out there, and everything doesn't have to come from me. It can flow through me, which of course is channeling. It's energy healing as a form of channeling. When you hear someone who's like singing just gives you shivers and makes you cry, and you talk with the singer, often they'll say, it just flows through me. So I do believe that you don't need to be a spiritual leader separated from the 3D world in order to be a spiritual leader. You can bring your spiritual energy to any level of leadership, including getting your family out the door to school and work in the morning or whatever.
Yeah. And I think we call that, I don't know how you feel about this terminology, Bonita, but embodied spirituality, where, yeah. So embodied spirituality, meaning the spirituality permeates everything we do. Is that what you're describing as well?
Um, well, you're lucky if it permeates everything you do.
Yes. I think that's the goal. I think that's what we're reaching for.
Yeah. I'm lucky if I hit 60%, I'm feeling really good about myself. Yes.
All right. Are we ready to move on from this slide?
I think so. I think so, because we have such good stuff coming up.
We do. And I love that you defined these different types of leadership. I hadn't heard that done elsewhere, and it didn't come to my mind. And I really appreciated this slide.
Yeah.
All right. This is me. I wanted to talk about the ego. I love talking about the ego. So I had to weave it into to this presentation as well. And a lot of this will be from personal experience, but also things that I see in others that I've worked with, either in a student teaching dynamic or just walking parallel paths as healers or practitioners, people in my circle, people in my community. The ego, time and time again, seems to come up as, the kind of the antagonist, so to speak, of our spiritual journey. And I've done so much work around this, and I actually have, and I would like to invite those listening to consider it to be part of the protagonist. It's not just the antagonist. Our ego, as so many of us know, it's a protective, it's a defense system, right? But having that defense system can give us a lot of information about things that we may be insecure about or needing to heal. So in that sense, our ego can become our ally. But for so many on the spiritual path, what I've seen and what many of you watching this will probably see if you start looking for it, is what I have read about called an enlightenment trap. So essentially an enlightenment trap, and Bonita, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well, but from how I've learned of this term, it's basically as we go along our spiritual path, there are certain tests that show themselves to us, that give us an opportunity to work through a barrier that is very, a very dense 3D sort of barrier, usually having to do with the ego. And, this could show up as limiting beliefs. It could show up as insecurities, narcissism, selfishness, all sorts of things. But the root to so many of these insecurities is our ego. And so the ego and our soul are always in this sort of dance in our 3D bodies. We have to have this ego in our 3D bodies. We can't dissolve the ego, at least not outside of ceremony, right? So we have to walk around with an ego. But what I have noticed is that people that tend to fixate on the ego as this antagonist is something they have to dissolve, get rid of, live in 100% complete humility oftentimes end up going the opposite direction on the spectrum that they want to go, right? So what is the role of the ego? And so for me, I start off with this idea: the ego is there to protect me. It's a defense mechanism, right? So there I'm automatically softening to the idea of the ego being the antagonist. I'm like, oh, you're protecting me. How sweet, right? That's very nice of you. And so it already helps me to shift my perspective around the ego. And I see the ego as something that challenges us, right? And challenges can be great for growth and spiritual evolution, right? To show us where we can use more healing. If we're being triggered, I see it as a moment of gratitude, like a moment to give thanks. Like, oh, that person just triggered me. That situation just triggered me. What does that tell me about myself? It means I need to heal X, Y, or Z. It means I'm still having some sort of emotional reaction to something that was unresolved or unhealed within myself, right? So now I'm able to see things more objectively. And as a healer, this is really potent medicine, to be able to see our emotions as information, to see them more objectively. And it doesn't mean that we are diminishing them or minimizing their value. In fact, it's quite the opposite, right? We're paying attention to them and sourcing information from them. So the goal here is so that our ego does not become inflated, right? We don't want that. Our ego doesn't need to take center stage, but there's so many possible pitfalls along the spiritual leadership journey, so to speak, I think, for this, and for those of us who are already teachers and healers, as many of us are in ARCADIA, I know it resonates, this idea of people coming up to you and saying, oh my God, you healed me. Oh my gosh, you're divine. Oh my God, I want to worship you. I want to worship you. Or just having this sort of energy or aura about them that you are magnificent. And that's beautiful. And I love it. And I celebrate it. And like, of course, I'm human. Like, that feels good. But also like recognizing that that's not great food for my ego. And so how can I receive that love and that truth that I am an amazing person, but without it going to my ego, right? And I don't have like a cut and dried answer for this. Because I get it plenty of times. I probably get it 4 or 5 times a week where people are just in awe about what I'm able to read or perceive into the future, or what organ on their body is malfunctioning. Like, so people are in awe sometimes. And for me, like I would usually put my hand on my heart. So maybe it's more of a somatic thing for me. And actually just saying thank you back. Like, thank you so much for your appreciation. Thank you for giving me thanks. Thank you for trusting me. And that always just feels so good, because I feel like I'm receiving the love and I'm receiving the adoration, but I'm also just sort of trying to mirror it back to them. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for coming to me. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you for opening up. So that feels really good. And it doesn't feel like it's feeding my ego. That's my little trick of something that I like to do. Not to take the lead. Oh my God, so many times in leadership roles, I've reminded myself to not take the lead. And I know that seems so maybe counterintuitive, but as a leader, I have taught myself to not to take the lead. And what I mean by that is allowing the natural flow and rhythm of the energies in the room, or the students, or the people in ceremony, or the people for healing, however that energy needs to flow, connect, grow, and evolve together, allowing that to happen. So I'm here to hold space. I'm here to witness. I'm here to make connections and facilitate, but it's actually about everyone else in the room. They are the primary focus. And so that's them taking the lead and not me taking the lead. Not to discredit or disrespect the truth of others. I think when our ego becomes inflated, it can be difficult not to perhaps feel triggered at some point, like all of us are prone to do and to experience as humans, and not to go for that knee-jerk reaction, possibly to say, oh, you're wrong because blah, 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 or I think you're an idiot, or whatever. That's not what my mom taught me. Like, there's no, why put each other down? And what does that say about us if we can't hold compassion and love for others who are on their own paths? So just walking with that truth. And even if I see someone who I know, like, I don't have to look that hard to see that they're really off in some other wild direction that I am not tapped into, and I don't know what they're talking about, because it happens. they're on their path, they're doing their thing, they're working through their karma and their soul contracts, and maybe Bonita has more to add to this. But there's something very sacred about also allowing others to be on their path and honoring their path while we're also on our path. And it doesn't mean that anybody's better or less than the other one. So that was my part that I wanted to share about the ego and different ways it can show up and how we can interact with the ego.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything you just said, which is like so rare with two spiritual teachers to agree on ego. That's like pretty awesome. Uh, because I do Akashic work, for me, it's all about the multi-life experience because our souls are in evolution and they need us down here doing what we do so we can bring lessons and knowledge and skills and frequency back to the soul so the soul can grow. So, sometimes I'll meet someone, they go, oh, you're a big phony, or you're this, you're that. I don't, I think you're talking to demons and, you're trying to steal my soul, or you're stupid and fat and ugly. I've heard it all. And my answer is generally, how awesome. This is where you are at this moment of this life that you designed for yourself. And I wish you joy experiencing it. Good luck with your life. I'm going to go live mine. Enjoy yours. Because I know some of my past lives, I've been pretty horrible in a few of my lives. Like, we're not all loving angels every single life. If we were, we would just stay in our souls. Our souls need us to have a variety of experiences. I spent 10,000 years as a warrior. Every time I died in battle, I'm like, okay, let's get bored, see how quickly I can go and kill and then be killed. 10,000 years running around murdering people because my soul thought that was awesome. This was a long time ago, by the way. I haven't murdered anyone lately. But the thing is, like, of course it hurts when someone comes up and tells me mean things about myself, but that's their issue in their life that they're dealing with. I don't need to absorb it into mine. In fact, I don't want to absorb it, and I want to probably take a big step back from that person. So when it comes to ego, we all hear people say, oh, I try to get my ego behind me. I tell my ego, get thee behind me. And I'm like, why would you turn your back on your ego when you can use your ego as a tool to help you with what you desire in life? Ego would not be in our bodies if it were not a useful tool. And what does ego do? Everything Dante said, 100% correct. When you watch this on video, I recommend you go back and watch everything that Dante said all over again, because that was brilliant. Ego is a tool that your mind, body, spirit uses to help you go forward with life. If ego is telling you bad things about yourself, then ego is showing you things you need to release so you can go forward. And if ego is encouraging you, you're the best, you're awesome, go for it. Listen to your ego. It means you're ready. Anytime you do manifestation or a puja or, a growth ceremony, it's always about looking at yourself where you are and recognizing what you desire, be it a thing, a position, an emotion, a relationship, whatever you desire. And then the first thing you have to do is release whatever is holding you back from being one with that which you desire. That's where ego comes in. Ego points out, you got to get rid of this, you got to get rid of that. Usually, if you're not used to working with ego, the first thing they'll say is, oh, you can't do that. You're blah, 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 a bunch of mean things. And you're like, oh, okay, ego, I have all of these issues that I need to release. And I know for a fact I'm not any of those things. So let's just throw them out. What next? And then ego's like, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. Ego will point out everything you got to get rid of so that you can go forward and claim what you desire. And then you can ask ego, like, what do I got to do next? You've seen people where everything falls in their place, and you're like, they've got a well balanced ego, they've got a good sense of self. They're using ego as a tool. And you've seen people who get in their head and they're all arrogant and egotistical. That's arrogance, it's not ego. It's important to remember the difference. They're using their ego cheaply to live in their state of arrogance. But I know none of you guys are going to do that. I mean, we all do it once in a while, but not as a lifestyle choice.
Yeah.
So I use ego as a tool. I've if you go on the Bonita Woods YouTube channel and type in the search of my videos ego, there will be a bunch of videos on how you can work with your guardian angel and your ego to achieve wonderful things. So yes, I love my ego, even though my ego is usually pretty mean to me.
Yeah,
So
as you were describing that, I was just thinking, like, how cool would it be if we had this magical tool or marker to point out all of the things we need to work on next? Whoa, we do.
yeah. And I do want to add, and I know Dante's heard this because it is literally my favorite quote in the world. It's a Buddhist and a Hindu quote, and it's a little bit of a joke. The quote is, "A happy man has a full belly and an empty head." And it's a little joke because they talk about the three brain centers: your head brain center, your heart brain center, and your instinct, your creative brain center, your sacral chakra. So a happy man, your heart chakra, has a full belly, your sacral chakra, and an empty head, your brain. And when they think, they use their heart brain and their sacral brain, but they tell their head brain to shut off. And when they're planning, what is it that I'm going to do? What do I want to make happen? How do I want to be? They listen only to their heart and their inspiration, their divine sacred inspiration. When the two of those have the vision and say, this is what we crave, they tell the brain, you figure out how to make it happen. Now, the brain always wants to be in charge. So the brain will activate the ego, and the ego will say, you can't do that, or whatever the ego says. It's up to you to keep your heart and your sacral true to your vision. The brain is smart. The brain can figure out how to make your vision happen. And the ego is the one who tells you what you need to release or create or pursue or practice to keep that brain in check.